Hello, this is Todd Luck, and this is a review of a very special horror comic recommendation that I'm making for October. Because with Halloween coming up, people are going to be looking for horror comics to read. And I wanted to do one that was special, but that a lot of people have forgotten about over the years. And I think I've got just the thing. And so, what a lot of people do still remember is that in 1992, Bram Stoker's Dracula, directed by Francis Ford Coppola, came out. The movie is a direct adaptation of the Bram Stoker novel, and it tries to stay close to the novel for the most part, but adds in additional blood and nudity and elaborate costumes and creature forms for Dracula, and has a real visual flair to it that Francis Ford Coppola brings to the work. It does add in a major subplot that wasn't in the novel, and we'll talk about that when we get to the story of the comic. But for the most part, this is an absolute love letter to the novel and also a love letter to cinema. Because of the time period that the original novel was done, Francis Ford Coppola decided to make this movie using only old filmmaking techniques. There is no post-production effects in this, no green screen, no CG. This is all shot on a soundstage with the exception of one scene that was reshot in a chapel. That's the wedding scene between Harker and Mina. And every single effect you see happened on the stage or in the camera. And it is amazing just how they made this movie. If you get a chance to take a look at the behind the scenes stuff, do so. It's fascinating. But this is just such a wonderful movie as far as just the visuals of it go, as far as the costumes go, and the music. The soundtrack is absolutely amazing. It's now my favorite horror movie soundtrack, and I highly recommend listening to it while you're reading the comic. This was a huge cinematic event back in the day. Now, because it was a rated R horror movie, it didn't have Happy Meal toys and action figures. But it did have tie-in merchandise, including a video game on every major console at the time, the NES, the Super NES, the Sega CD, with that famous game over screen that you're seeing right there. And there was even a first-person shooter like Doom or Wolfenstein based on the movie that was on PC, which is pretty wild. And of course, as part of the marketing tie-ins, there was a card set put out by Topps. And so when Topps decided to get into comic publishing in 1992, they decided to start with a comic adaptation of Bram Stoker's Dracula. And not just any adaptation, they got probably the best adaptation writer in the entire industry, Roy Thomas, who was known for his work on Robert E. Howard's Conan. And they also ended up getting, for the artwork, Mike Mignola, one of the best horror artists in the entire industry. Probably at the time best known for his work on Gotham by Gaslight. But of course, a couple years after this miniseries was published, he would begin his life work on Hellboy. And so this is a review of Bram Stoker's Dracula, a 4-issue miniseries by Topps Comics published in 1992. And just right off, let me just say that this cover for the first issue is one of my favorite things Mike Mignola has ever done. This should be the movie poster. It is just utterly gorgeous, perfectly captures the movie, perfectly captures the characters and the feel of the comic. And it's just so awesome. This is the cover that launched an entire company. It's just that darn good. The other covers are no slouch. This is the cover for issue 2, and we have Dracula and Mina. We see Lucy in the background, and we also have Dracula's werewolf form. Now, you'll notice that it is different than what you see in the movie. I don't necessarily have any explanation for that. I do like it better here. I think it looks cooler. Mike Mignola just draws a really cool traditional werewolf, but I do understand why they wanted Gary Oldman's face to show through the costume in the movie, and I think it looks cool there too. Issue 3 features Vampire Lucy with Dracula looming in the background and God's Madmen over here, and it's just a really cool, dark, creepy cover. And the final issue is very dramatic, a lot of fire. are vampire hunters facing off against Dracula in his bat form, with Mina standing beside Dracula, kind of hidden away there. A very interesting cover. Also worth noting is that Topps did put out a trade paperback collection of the 4-issue miniseries with a new Mike Mignola cover and back cover and original artwork. It's definitely harder to find, and it will cost you a little bit of money if you can find it, but it is definitely worth getting if you ever spot it. So the individual issues of the miniseries came like this in a poly bag. And so they were $2.95 a pop, which was a premium price back then. And the reason for that was that they included trading cards. Each issue came with 4 trading cards. And so each issue came with a trading card with a photograph from the movie, and each card had information on the back and along with another photo from the movie. They would also come with a card featuring the virgin art from the covers of the comic. They would feature original artwork of the different characters, and there would be a card that was painted a portrait of a character from the movie. I won't say I'm a huge card collector. I don't have a lot of different card sets, but I am a sucker for just getting free cards with stuff. And so I just love the idea of comic books that come with cards like this. And so this was a very common thing for Topps to do, especially with the early issues. So if you're ever getting something from Topps Comics, make sure that the issue didn't come polybag, because if it came polybagged, it had cards and you don't want to miss out on those. It was just a really, really nice little added bonus. But Topps smartly knew that the cards alone weren't enough to justify that premium price, so they gave you cover-to-cover content. So you open this thing up, and you're greeted each issue by this gorgeous image by Mike Mignola of Van Helsing on the page that kind of does a recap of what's going on. The first 3 issues have 28 pages worth of story apiece. The last issue has 31 pages of story. All of the non-story pages are taken up by articles in the back about the movie, complete with pictures. Issue 2 has this original pull-out poster by Mike Mignola. And each issue's back cover has original artwork by Mike Mignola with a quote from the movie. And so this is the back covers for issues 1 and 2. And these are the back covers for issues 3 and 4. So you have cover-to-cover content. This is how you launch a comic book company. This is like Marvel Super Specials back in the day, but just done in a much longer format that's more thorough and covers more of the movie. Now let's talk about the story in here. Now, back in the day, I'm sure readers noticed that this was very different from what was in the movie. And they probably assumed that, like most comic adaptations, it's working on an earlier version of the script and that changes were made, but they really didn't have a way to confirm that. Back in the day, you didn't have access to special features and deleted scenes. This is the original release of the DVD for this movie, and you just pop it in and it just plays. It has no special features at all. However, since then, there has been an updated DVD released of it with special features, which I highly recommend watching, and deleted scenes. And so now we know why that movie adaptation was so different. It's from those deleted scenes. And so I was looking at a YouTube video with those deleted scenes in it, and someone in the comment section was saying, like, man, there really should be a director's cut where we can see all these deleted and extended scenes in the movie. And so that, my friends, is exactly what this miniseries is. This is that director's cut where you get to see all those original scenes in the context of the movie as they would have been in the movie if it had been released like that. And that starts right off the bat with an extended version of Dracula's origin here. And so this is how the movie opens. In the novel, it never says how Dracula becomes a vampire. Here we use backstory based on the history of Vlad the Impaler, who was the historical figure that probably inspired Dracula. And Vlad was a warrior prince who defended Europe from the Ottomans. And just like in the movie, his wife did commit suicide. In the movie, the priests tell him that his wife is damned because she committed suicide, and so he denounces God. And here's where we get our extended cut version of it, where the blood is actually starting to kind of swallow up and drown the corpse of his wife, which transitions into Mina having her hair washed. And so in this version of the opening, Lucy's already there and they're already, talking about, the naughty stuff in Arabian Nights. And then Jonathan Harker comes in and tells her about this real estate deal that's going to make him rich in Transylvania. Yeah, that's not going to work out well. But I like this version of the opening narratively. Obviously, it makes sense to transition to Mina because she is the reincarnation of Dracula's wife in the movie and is a very major plot character in the movie. However, I do understand why it was cut the way it was for the actual theatrical release because it creates more tension and focuses more on Dracula. And you'll notice that Mike Mignola is doing this in his own art style. He's not following the lighting that was in the movie. He is doing this as a Mike Mignola comic, as he should, and it fits perfectly. These are just such iconic images. The artwork is just so gorgeous and so creepy. In issue 2, there's an extended scene of Harker going through Dracula's castle, and you get this wonderful. This was actually shot. You can see this in deleted scenes. There was this wonderful backdrop of all of these impaled skeletons. It's super creepy stuff. I definitely wish this had been in the movie. And here's a wonderful opening page in issue 2 with Harker with the Brides of Dracula. This is what they're called in the marketing material. They're never named in the movies, just like in the novels. They never name these characters or say what their relationship to Dracula actually is, but they have become popularly known as the Brides over the years. And this was the comic book Mike Mignola was born to draw. I've seen this described as Mignola's best work, and I'm not going to argue with that. So let's talk about what the movie adds to the novel, and that is a subplot that begins with Dracula's origin and then goes throughout the novel as Dracula seducing Mina, leading up to him getting his fangs into her. And so this is a bit different, right? This is definitely an addition, and I think this is going to be a make or break for a lot of people. It definitely adds a lot more depth to Dracula. We understand why he does what he does more. It humanizes him some, but obviously he's still a villain. He's still a monster. I'm never going to root for a murderer and a rapist, right? But we do understand his torment and feel it a little bit more in this version. And it also, gives a different context to Mina and makes her a more important character as well. I probably would have zigged where they zagged at some points in that plot line, especially at the end. However, I do think that the subplot does work in the movie, and I understand why it's there. I understand why all of the changes and updates are there because obviously vampire lore has evolved over the years and it's become bloodier and it's become sexier and more romantic. And so this was a way to kind of incorporate all of that into the novel while still keeping the heart of the novel in this adaptation. And I think they do a good job of that. And so, yes, I do highly, highly recommend this 4-issue miniseries. Even if you're not a fan of Dracula or vampires, this is just such a wonderful piece of comic book art. It's just worth owning. And this was a huge deal at the time. And I didn't actually own this back in the day. I am reading this for the first time for this review, and I'm so glad that I did. But this was a great, great way for Topps to launch its comic book imprint. And they put out a lot of good comics and surprisingly, a lot of horror comics. Bram Stoker's Dracula inspired a similar film adaptation to be made of the Mary Shelley Frankenstein novel, which is quite good and highly recommended. And Roy Thomas wrote the film adaptation for that for Topps. Roy Thomas also wrote a completely original 3-issue miniseries for Topps called Dracula, Vlad the Impaler. And Roy Thomas also wrote Frankenstein and Dracula together for Topps in a 3-issue miniseries called The Frankenstein Dracula War with some really cool Mike Mignola covers. They also did a 2-issue miniseries of Dracula versus Zorro with amazing artwork by Thomas Yates, and I've done a review of this. Good stuff. They also published Ray Bradbury comics, which is adaptations of his short stories, including his horror stories. In issue 4, Mike Mignola illustrates a wonderful interplanetary horror story called The City. Topps also did a long-running series of The X-Files, which had artwork at the beginning by Charles Adlard, who would go on to do Walking Dead. And they published Lone Ranger and Tonto, which combine horror and Western elements to create a unique story by Joe R. Lansdale and Tim Truman. All right, that's it. And so I hope you guys found something useful in this video. Topps is a solid comic publisher I just don't hear anyone talking about, and they put out so much cool stuff. All right, guys, like and subscribe for more videos. And until next time, see ya.